Welcome back to our class, and this is Sec 1, and the section number is 18896. And this is the lecture video for week 5. In week 5, we're going to talk about two topics in cognitive psychology, which are sensation and perception. So sensation and perception are very important concepts and topics in the one branch of psychology, which is cognitive psychology. So cognitive psychology basically studies the how the mind is thinking, how the mind is processing all those kind of information and organize and perceive, organize and interpret those information, and also yeah, so basically cognitive basically means thinking or knowledge. So that's how that word is from. So this week we're going to talk about sensation and perception. That's basically parts that how the mind is receiving the information from the other parts of the physical body and interpret and organize those information into the information that the mind and we can understand. So let's continue our lecture. So let's know about some very basic concepts about sensation and perception. So first of all, let's talk about sensation. So we all know that we have all kinds of those senses. So everybody has different kinds of senses, such as seeing, such as hearing, such as touching, such as smelling, such as tasting. So those are the five senses that we already know. But what does sensation mean? What's the connection between the word sensation and sense? So let's talk about some kind of a biology here. And in week 2, we have talked about the neural system, the biological basis of psychology, the biological basis of how people think and behave. So we know that in the brain is the part that processes all the information. But how does the brain get information? Where does the brain get information from? So what kind of information is it? So all kinds of information from outside the brain is actually the sensory information. So actually those information are from those senses. We can see things, we can hear sounds, we can touch things, we can feel the texture of the objects. So these kinds of information is sensory information. So our physical body must get this sensory information from some kind of organ, such as eye, such as ears, such as the skin of the physical body. So information is captured from some kind of organs in the physical body. And then in the neural system, we know that there is a peripheral neural system. There is a pathways that connect these organs and the brain. So they will send the sensory information from these organs to the brain. So they go through all kinds of neurons, and they go to the spinal cord, and the spinal cord send this information to the brain, and the brain process this information. So what kind of cells are receiving this sensory information? So there are some very specialized neurons. So neuron is every neuron is the basis of the neural system. So neuron is a very specialized type of cell in the body. And there are not only one kind of cell, one kind of a neuron in the brain. And also there are other kinds of very specialized neurons. that respond to specific types of stimuli in the environment. And those specialized neurons can transfer those stimuli into the information inside of the neural system. So in chapter 2, in week 2, we have talked about how the information is transferred into electronic signals inside of neurons, and information can be transferred inside of a neuron and between any two neurons. But those specialized neurons in those organs that can form senses, those neurons can transfer those outside stimuli into the signals inside the neural system. For example, in the eyes, so the eyes can see things. We can only see things through the two eyes that we have. But in the eyes, there are two kinds of neurons that respond to lights. Those are cones and rods. So those cones and rods inside the eyes, those are specialized neurons that can be responsive or can be activated there when there is light. So that's why we can see lights. And also in the nose, our nose is used for smelling. So we can smell different things because there are a kind of a specialized neurons in the nose that is called olfactory bulb. So olfactory bulb is a very specialized neuron that responds to those smells. So that's why we can smell things. So those kinds of specialized neurons are called the sensory receptors. It means that those are the parts that receive those senses. So those neurons are called sensory receptors. So when the sensory information, such as light, such as sound, such as smell, such as the texture of some objects, when this kind of a sensory information is detected by the sensory receptor, that's when we say sensation occurs. So sensation happens when this kind of sensory receptors detect or receive those sensory information. When those lights, when those sounds, when those texture information are transferred to the signals inside of a neural system by the sensory receptors, that's when and where sensation occurs. So when we talk about sensation, that's a process. That's a process that our physical body can receive all kinds of external stimuli in the environment and transfer those stimuli into the sensory information inside our neural system. And there are different kinds of senses. And of course, there are different kinds of sensory receptors in different parts of the physical body that constantly transfer those kinds of external stimuli into signals in the neural system. So vision is a type of sense. Of course, we can see things. That's a vision. Audition is hearing. So we can hear things. Means that we can have a sense of audition. Olfaction means smelling. Smelling is another word for smelling is olfaction. And another one is called gustation. So it's about tasting. So all these words are the formal names of those senses. So it's different from the words that we are talking about in everyday life. We talk about seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, but in those formal names, those are vision, audition, olfaction, and gustation. And also here is somatosensation, it means touching. So because we can touch things with our finger or any parts on the skin, we can feel the texture of those objects, right? So we can feel the glass is very slippery, right? So we can feel the human skin is not that slippery. It's like really rough texture, or we can feel the texture of a rock or stone. It's not slippery at all. So that's somatosensation. And also there is a vestibular sense. It means the sense of balance. So vestibular basically means balance. So because we can stand without falling down, we can sleep without falling down to the ground from the bed. Why is that? Because we have a sense of balance. We can stand there without falling because we can stand still, right? So we can feel that. When we are sleeping, we lie on the bed, but we will not falling down to the ground from the bed because the vestibular sense is working, even though we are still sleeping. And also there's a sense about the body position. So we can have a sense of where our body is or how the body is, where the body is, what the state, the physical state of the body is. We have that kind of sense. It's called a proprioception. Yeah, we can have a sense of our different parts of our body. And also we can have a sense of movement. When our physical body is moving, so for example, when we are running, we know we are running. When we are running very faster and faster, it means that we are accelerating. We know that. So that kind of sense is called kinesthesia. Kinesthesia is also a word that means the subject that people studies how people move, but also it's a kind of a sense. Kinesthesia. Also, we have a sense of pain. Uh, if we are if we get hurt, if we are attacked, we have a feeling of pain, right? So it's a kind of a specialized a kind of a sensory receptors that capture that kind of feeling. It's called a nociception. So normally the sensory receptors for pain are located inside of the skin. So inside the skin, there are different kinds of sensory receptors that respond to different kinds of stimuli. So we can, when we touch things, we have the somatosensation. That is about touching. We can feel the texture of the things. That's one type of sensory receptor. And also we can feel the pain. That's nociception. That's another type of sensory receptors. And also, and last, we can feel the temperature of things, or we can feel the temperature of the air. That's called a thermoception. So also inside our skin, there are sensory receptors for thermoception that can get the information about the temperature, whether it's really hot or really cold, it's cool or it's warm, something like that. So we can have a lot of senses. Of course, we can have the pain inside of our body, such as stomach pain, such as headache. So how do we know that? Because there are also sensory receptors in those organs. So for example, in the stomach, there are some kind of sensory receptors that receive the feeling of pain. So that's why how we know there is a stomach pain or not. Uh, yeah, so these are some basic types of senses. I don't know if there are more senses. It depends on how the more discussions, more discoveries of scientists. Maybe the physical body of humans even have more senses that we do not know yet. But so far, we all know that these are the types of senses that everybody has. Okay, so that now we know what the sensation means. So sensation just means like when the sensory receptors get the information from the outside of the environment and transfer into a signal. So that's when sensation happens. So now sensory receptors are very limited. So they are not very limited, but their ability is limited. It means that not all the information, not all the sensory information can be received by the sensory receptors. So there are tons of things going on. There are too much information going on outside of the environment. But our physical body can only receive a part of this sensory receptors, sensory information. Sorry. So these receptors like eyes and ears, they are working hard all the time, but they still have the limited ability because there is too much information going on at one time. So that the stimuli outside the environment must be strong enough so that the sensory receptor, a certain sensory receptor, can detect it. So that means that there is a threshold for the sensory receptors to get that information. For example, if the light must be bright enough or light enough, the sound must be loud enough, right, for us to hear. If a certain sound is too low, too quiet, we cannot hear that. If a certain light is too weak, it's not bright enough, we cannot see it, right? So there is a standard. There is a certain level of that stimuli that we need to, that above that level, we can get the information. But if some kind of information is below that level of the strength, our sensory receptors cannot get it. So that level or that standard or that threshold is called the absolute threshold. So this concept is that's a level, that's the minimum level that we can get that stimulus. So the stimulus must be reach to a certain minimum level for us to detect. So if that stimulus is below that level, we cannot detect that. And another thing that in this concept is that how to decide whether a stimulus can be detected or not. So that when we say that for half of the time, the stimulus can be detected. If there is a lowest level, that's the absolute threshold. So in other words, if we want to test whether the level of the light, for example, we can ask somebody and ask them to see a light, to look to capture a signal which is light, but that light is too weak. It's really weak. Sometimes the person cannot see it. Sometimes the person can see it, and we can ask that person to have different trials, have different times to try to see that light. If that person can see the light for half of the time. For example, if that person tries like 20 times, but only 10 times that person can see the light. That is the minimal absolute threshold of the light. Absolute threshold for the vision, for that person's vision, to be specifically. So that is called absolute threshold. So a stimulus must reach a minimum level so that the sensory receptor can detect that stimulus. Some sensory receptors might be very, very sensitive, and they have very strong abilities. For example, that's an example in the textbook. The human eye, one human eye can detect a candle flame. When the candle is light, there's candle flame, and the eye can detect a candle flame 30 miles away in a clear night. I think that's a very strong ability. And the human eye can see a very tiny candle flame very far away. And also another example is from dogs, I think. Dogs can hear very, very, very weak sounds. And their ears are very, very sensitive. And also their noses are very, very sensitive, and very, very, very weak smells can be detected by their noses. But humans cannot do that. Human noses and the ears are not that sensitive, not as sensitive as dogs' ears and noses. And another level that we need to know is called the difference threshold. That's the minimum level of the differences between two lights, two stimuli. So what does that mean? So every stimulus can happen in different places. Every stimulus can occur with a certain level of strength. For example, some kind of light can be very bright, some kind of light can be very weak. And some kind of sounds are very, very loud, and some kinds of sounds are not that loud. They are very quiet. So the minimum difference that we can tell, oh, those are the two stimuli, those are the two sounds, those are the two lights. They are different. They are not the same. So that's that difference, that the minimum level of difference is called the difference threshold. So there's one example. For example, if we ask person to sit in an experiment room, and suddenly there's a sound with a certain loudness. So we know that a sound can be very loud and it can be not that loud. For example, if I make some kind of sound, like a certain level of loudness, right? If I make another sound, so the second sound I made just now was not that loud. It's a little bit quieter, but can you tell the difference? For example, in the experiment, there are two sounds. The loudness of the two sounds are very, very, very similar. So ask that person to tell whether these two sounds are the same or not. There are two sounds with different level of loudness, or they are the sound with the same loudness. They are same loud or they are different loud. So we can tell whether there is a smallest difference that the people can tell there is a difference. That smallest difference is called a difference threshold or it's called a minimum level of difference between two stimuli. So there are two kinds of thresholds that we introduce here. The first one is called an absolute threshold. So that's the threshold or the minimum level that humans can detect a certain kind of a stimulus. So that is about one stimulus. And the difference threshold is the minimum level of the differences between two stimuli. That's about two stimuli. People can tell whether those two stimuli are the same or they are different. And there's a smallest difference. That is the difference threshold. So let's go to another part that is about perception. We will introduce some specific senses such as vision and audition later, but let's talk about some basic information about perception. So here's a question for you. You can see a picture on the right, but what can you see? Definitely you can see some lines, black color, white color, some kind of lines here. Of course you can see that, but what kind of person or thing can you see in this picture? What kind of what is it? What is this inside of this picture? You can pause the video and look at it carefully and write down the answer. So let's look at this picture. We can see that there's some like black color here, right? So there's some kind of white color, some kind of lines, black lines. But what is it? There are two options actually. One option is that in this picture there is a young lady. And option two, a old lady. So who is it? Is it young lady or old lady? So it depends on how you see it, right? So some people can see a young lady, but some people can see an old lady. And if you can see a young lady, you must see here is the face of this young lady, right? So here, this part is the face. That's the face here, right? So this part is the hair, the black hair. And this part is the neck. And here's a lace, right? So there's a lace, which is black on the neck. And this part is a coat. And this part is a scarf that covers the hair, right? So there is a fur here. That's some kind of decoration. So can you see a young lady here? The young lady is looking at this direction. So here is the eyes of the young lady. Here's the 1 year of that lady. So you can see a young lady, but if you look at this picture in another way, you can see an old lady. So how do you see an old lady? So just now I just talked about there was a young lady, and yes, for sure that here's a face, here's a hair, but how can you see there is an old lady? That's very interesting. This part is also the hair, And this part is also the scarf that covers hair. And this part is still the coat. But the difference is that the old lady, this part is the eye of the old lady. This part is not a lace. It's her mouth. That's mouth. And this part is a nose. Nose. Can you see it? So here is the mouth, and here is the nose, and here is the eye. So the lady is looking at this direction. If you perceive, if you look at the picture in that way, you can see an old lady. And here's the eye, and here's a mouth, and here is the nose. So that's very interesting, and you can see two things in the same picture. And now let's go to another question. So you can look at the picture on the right. You can see there's something on the ground. There are two persons that are arguing about what they are seeing. One person says, "Oh, that's the number 6," and the other person says, "Oh, that's number 9." So what number is it? What number is it on the ground? So one person says, "Oh, that's the 6," because this is the top of that number. So that's a 6 on the ground. That makes sense. But the other person says, that's a 9. That also makes sense. But because from his direction, this direction is the top. So that this is a 9. That also makes sense. So that's the same object, same thing, but different people think that's a different number because they say different things. They say this, they get the same sensory information. So sensation occurs in that phase. They get the same sensory information, but they think they see different things. It's also true for the picture just now that we saw, whether it's a young lady or it's an old lady. We see the same thing, but we think we get the different information. That's what I want to talk about. So we see the same thing. We have the same sense, but we think that's a different thing. How does it happen? Because after sensation, when the sensory information is received and also the sensory information get to the brain need to process those information, need to interpret those information, need to understand those information, need to organize those information. So that's where and when perception occurs. So the perception occurs in the brain, not in the sensory receptors. In the brain, the information is organized, is interpreted, is experienced, is understood. So that's where perception occurs. So perception is a phenomenon in the brain, not in those organs, but in the brain. So perception is just the ways that the sensory information is organized, interpreted, and consciously experienced. Because we know we see something, we know we see a lady, either a young lady or an old lady. We know that we see a number on the ground, whether it's a 6 or 9. But why different people see different numbers? Because they have different perceptions in their different brains, even though they perceive or get the same sensory information. They have different perceptions. So that's called the perception. So sometimes we say same things, something happens, and people have different explanations, even though we see the same things, but people think, oh, that's a different thing. They have different explanations about what they have seen. And how the information, how the sensory information is organized or processed. There are two ways. The one way is called the bottom bottom up processing. Perceptions are formed from the sensory input. So that is just all the stuff that we get just now, and those information build up into a something that we can perceive. That's called the bottom up processing. And also there is another process called the top down processing. It means that we get some sensory information, but what is it? We use the knowledge that we already have in our brain. We use the past experiences. We use some kind of ideas and thoughts that already exist in our brain to interpret, to understand those sensory information. So not only just get the information and build up to a whole picture, but we also use the available knowledge, memory, thoughts, and experiences to give a explanation of what actually see or what we actually get. So that's called a top-down processing. So for example, top-down processing. This person sees the number 6, that person sees the number 9. But how can they tell whether it's a number, right? So why this shape is a number? How do you tell? How do they know? That's a question to think about. So how do they know this shape here is a number? Whether it's number 6 or 9, they are both right, but how do they know there is a number? Because in their brains, there is already a pattern or a prototype of every number, of every digit. We have a form or original form or a prototype of every digit of a number is, right? So we know what 1 is like. We know 2, what 2 is like. We know what the 3 is like. So if we see some kind of a thing that is very alike, it is very like to a certain number, we know, oh, that's that number. For example, I can see a number of this number. That's 2, right? So if I write, that's also 2, right? So if I write this, that is also 2. So these 3 shapes are, these 3 like objects are all 2s. How do you know that? Right? So if I write, it's also 2. People know that. Everybody knows that so fast. There's no doubt. These are all 2s, number 2. Because in our minds, we already have a notion or idea of a 2 is like. So if we can see any picture that is like a 2, we can get it. We can perceive it as a 2. So sometimes people write 3 like this and 3 like this, also 3, right? Some people write 4 like this. Some people write 4 like another way. People have different ways of writing these numbers. And also another example is handwriting. So everybody has a different habit of writing letters and numbers. But how can you understand the other people's handwriting? Think about it. Because you have in the brain, you already have a very strong notion and idea of each letter, what each letter is like, what each number is like, so that you can understand other people's handwriting. That is a very difficult task for computers. Like the scientists want to train the computers to understand people's handwriting. And it's very difficult. And oftentimes computers cannot detect whether it's just a random picture or it's a letter. Because computers don't have the system that we have in our brain. Yeah, because we already have some kind of knowledge and thoughts about what things are like. We can perceive, we can understand different things because we can do the top-down processing, not only bottom processing. So actually bottom processing and top-down processing are like working at the same time together. We both rely on the sensory input and also rely on our existing knowledge and thoughts to perceive things, to understand things. So that is about sensation and perception. So far we know what sensation is and what perception is. So they happen in different stages and in different places, actual places. And next, let's talk about the waves. So that's why we talk about waves, because that's the nature of the information for some senses. So specifically for vision and audition, or for hearing and seeing. So actually our eyes and ears are detecting the waves so that we can see things, we can hear things. So the nature of sounds and lights are waves. So let's recap what waves are and some properties of waves in the nature. So the light is actually electromagnetic wave. So we can see lights. Some lights are brighter, some lights are weaker. All those lights are electromagnetic waves in the nature. They exist in the nature. The sunlights are actually the waves that are formed in the sun, and they shoot these waves into the nature, and they get to the earth so that we can see the sunlights. The sounds, we can hear the sounds. The sound, in nature, the sound is the wave-like movement of molecules. We can hear the sounds from the air or in the water. So the nature of it, just these molecules are vibrating, or the molecules are shaking with a certain pattern. So these movements of molecules, these vibrating and shaking movements of molecules are waves. So so that the ears can detect the wave-like movements of those molecules. Either it's air or it's water or it's another stuff. So for example, if you are in a outside, if you're outdoor, all the sounds that you hear from outside the environment is actually from the wave-like movements of the air, because the air surrounds your physical body. Every sound you hear is actually from the air. And the wave-like movements of the molecules in the air are actually from the wave-like movements of molecules from other objects. For example, the car is moving. When the car is moving, the car is making some kind of noises. because of the vibrating or the wave-like movement of the cars. And they influence the air surrounds it, that surrounds it. So the air is moving like a wave. And the wave is going to your eyes. And so to your ears. And so your ears can hear that kind of noise. So that's the nature of sound. But sometimes you can hear your own voice. When you are talking, you can hear your own voice. How is that possible? Because your physical body is vibrating. So that kind of sound, your voice, your own voice, is from on your own throat. And the sounds coming from the throat and get to your ears inside of your body. So that's how you hear your own voice. Part of it is from the air outside of your physical body, but part of the sound, the voice, your own voice that you hear is from inside of your physical body. That's why when you hear your own voice, when you're talking, the sound, that's kind of a voice, sounds different when you hear the recording of your own voice. So if you record your own voice and you hear the recording, it sounds different. It sounds a different person because the way that you hear your own voice is different. So in a wave, we can see the picture on the bottom. The wave is like this. It's not really like this, but the wave is like this shape. And here we can see that there is the peak here. Here's the bottom. So the amplitude is the height of the wave from the lowest point to the highest. From lowest point to the highest, that's the amplitude. And also another property of the wave is the wavelength. Wavelength is the length of a wave from one peak to the next peak. So here's one peak, and here is another peak that is adjacent to this peak. The distance between these two adjacent peaks is a wavelength. So here's a wavelength, and here's the amplitude. And also here's the frequency of a wave, or you can think that's a pitch of that wave. That's a number of waves that passes a given point in a given time period. Because the wave is moving. It's not stable, it's moving. Because the light is moving and the sound is also moving with a certain speed, right? Some wave is moving slowly, some wave is moving quickly. So we use the term frequency to know whether this wave is moving quickly or slowly. How do we know that? In a given time period, for example, 1 second, in 1 second, if there are like 10 waves that passes a same given point, we can see that frequency is 10. If in 1 second, if there are only 2 waves that passes a certain given point, we can see that frequency is 2. We can tell which wave is faster. The wave with the frequency of 10 is much faster than the wave with the frequency of 2, right? So because there are more numbers of waves that passes that given point within the same time period. So when the wave's frequency is high, it means that it moves really fast. So actually for light, you see some light is very, very bright. some kind, for example, sunlight. So it means that the nature of it is the amplitude of the light is higher. And yes, and you can see different colors. Why you can see different colors? Because different colors, the light with different colors have different frequencies. The red light has a lower frequency, means that have a longer wavelength. The purple or the blue light has a higher frequency or shorter wavelength. Yeah. So the color of light is decided by the frequency of the light. The brightness, how bright the light is decided by the amplitude of the wave of the sound light. For the sounds, some sound is louder, like ah. Some sound is not that louder, like ah. So you can tell the difference. The loudness of the sound is decided by the amplitude of the sound wave. So the amplitude of the sound wave, how exaggerated the sound wave is, decided the loudness of the sound. The pitch of the sound is the frequency of the sound. Some sound is very high and some sound is very low. So you can tell there are different pitches of the sounds. Like in music, there is do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, right? So the first do is lower, and the second, the do on the end is at the end is higher do and lower do. Do, re, mi, fa, sol. So sol is higher than fa, and fa is higher than the mi, and the mi is higher than that. Right, that is higher than do. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Right, so you can tell the different pitches of the sound. Yeah, so that's the differences about the pitches of the sound wave. So that's the basic physics knowledge about the light wave and the sound wave. So let's go to know about different senses. And the first senses that we can know about is vision or seeing. So we have talked about our eyes are the organs that receive the light. And vision is, in nature, vision is our ability to detect the lights. And the nature of light is a wave, the electromagnetic wave. So our eyes can detect those electromagnetic waves. Let's look at the anatomy or the structure of the eyes, the two eyeballs, the visual system. We can see, yeah, it's like ball shape, structure. On the surface, there is cornea. That's transparent. So cornea is totally transparent. That's covering over the eye, so that protects the eye. And we can see this part. There's a pupil. So pupil is actually the hole in the eye that passes the light through. So the light coming from this direction, the light can pass through the pupil and go into inside of the eye. So you remember cornea is transparent. So cornea is a not blockage of light. So light can directly coming from the outside and go inside of the eye through the pupil. Pupil is a little hole in the eye. And there is iris. So iris is a group of muscles that surrounds the pupil. So you can see pupil is a small hole, and there are iris that surrounds the pupil. So here is the pupil here. That's the hole, and this part is iris that surrounds the pupil. These muscles can control the size of the pupil. It means that if the pupil is larger, there is more light that go inside of the eye. If the pupil is smaller, there are less light that go into the light. The lens, the iris can controls how big and how small the pupil is. And behind the pupil, there is the lens. Lens is a structure that is transparent, so that it has no color. It's not a blockage of the light, but it's curved. It means that the lens can curve the light because the lens can provide additional focus. So if you know some kind of basics, you can know that lens can like make us to see more clearer sceneries, or can see more clearer pictures. Because the lens is this shape is a lens, and for example, here is the pupil, and light comes through the pupil and goes through the lens like this. However, lens is a curved structure, so that it can curve the light. So the direction of the light is slightly changed. You can see here. So you can see the lights from different places go to a same place, go to the same direction. It can provide additional focus. If I like draw a bigger picture, you can see it clearly. If the light is like this, if there is blue light, not blue light, yellow light, you can see light is coming from this direction. You can see, for example, here the light. Here, the blue part is the lens. The lens can like curve the light because the shape of the lens is like that. Sorry, I didn't really. Yeah, for example, so the directions of these lights are curved, so they go to the same place. You can see that's this focus here. All the lights go to the same place, and this is called the focus. The focus here is inside of the eye. Okay, and when the light's coming into the light and inside of the eye, that's the transparent liquid. So inside the eye, that's empty, but it's not totally empty. There is the liquid, transparent liquid. And the light goes to the inner surface of the eyeball. So on the inner surface, there is retina. Retina is the inner surface of the eyeball. Retina contains the photoreceptor cells. So what is photoreceptor cells? So photoreceptor cells are sensory receptor cells that are sensitive to lights. So you know how we see lights because the photoreceptor cells can detect those lights and transfer the lights into the signals in the neural system. So actually, you can see how the visual system or the eyes are working. the line and the lights can go through the lens and go through the pupil and go through the lens and go to the retina. And on the retina, there are sensory receptors for lights. So that it's called photoreceptor cells. So for photoreceptor cells can detect those lights. There are two kinds of photoreceptor cells. One is called cone. The other is called a rod. And also you can see there are different kinds of neurons that are on surface of the light. And those neurons can form a bundle of neurons. It's called the optic nerve here, this part. So optic nerve consists of thousands and many neurons of photoreceptors. Okay, so let's look at what is inside of a retina. So retina, the structure of retina is not that simple. We can see that's the structure on the left. That's the structure of the retina. The light is, let's see, the light is coming from this direction. And finally, they go to the rods and cones on the bottom. Right, so there are two kinds of photoreceptor cells. They are sensitive to lights. They can detect the lights, but they have these two types of photoreceptor cells have different roles. For example, cones are very sensitive to the details of the picture. So why we can see clearly what is going on in our environment because of the cones. The cones can detect the details of the light. And also it provides a spatial resolution. Means that our eyes are very high pixel camera, for example, very high pixel screen. So it's much higher than the real camera. So the camera pixel is not, the resolution of the camera is not really high compared to the eyes. The eyes has a very high resolution because of the cones. And also cones can detect the color. Why we see color because of the cones. And another type of photoreceptor cells is rods. It's different. They cannot really see the colors or the details, but they can detect the movements. When the light is moving all the time, we can see the movements, right? So you can see the movement of my hand. I can see the movement of my hands clearly because the rods can detect the movements. And also rods can work well in the low light condition. That's why we can still see something when in the dark night. When the environment is so dark, the rods we can still see something because the rods are working well in the low light conditions. So that's the role of rods. The cones provides resolution or sensitive to the details, also detect color. And the rods can see the movements clearly and can see things in the really dark environment. So these are the two roles, the different roles for these two types of photoreceptor cells. And rods and cones transfer the signal of lights into the signal in the neural system, but how they send this information to the brain. So there is another kind of cells in the retina. It's called ganglion cells. So ganglion cells is like a bridge. It's like a message system. This kind of cells connect cones and rods and receive the information from the cones and rods and send this information to the nervous system, to the spinal cord, to the brain. And the optic nerve that we saw from the last slide, that bundle of neurons, actually those are the axons of the ganglia cells. So the rods and cones send information to the ganglion cells. So these are the ganglion cells. And you can see the ganglia cells, that's the core of the cell and the main body of the cell, one ganglion cell. You can see here are the dendrites. They're dendrites of the ganglia cells, the main body of the ganglia cells. And here is the axon. This part is axons of a lot of ganglion cells. Those axons form the optical nerve, and that nerve connects the brain. So ganglia cells actually connects the photoreceptor cells and the brain. So that's how the visual system is working. So that's how we can see things, because the rods and cones in the retina is in the eyeballs. In the eyes, the retina and the cones transfer the lights into the neural signals, and the information is sent to the ganglion cells, and ganglion cells send information to the brain. And we talk about it in chapter 2, the occipital lobe on the back of the brain. Occipital lobe in the brain is actually processing those visual information. So actually it means that the ganglia cells need to send information from the eyeballs to the occipital lobe. It's a long way to go, but it's not that long. Okay, so that's the visual system. And the next part, how we see colors. So we just talked about the cones can detect color, but how exactly cones can detect color? There's one theory that explains why we see colors. It's called the trichromatic theory of color vision. Trichromatic theory of color vision. So tri means three. So tri is part of the word. Tri means three. Chromatic means color. So trichromatic means three color. You can understand as the three color theory of color vision. Why is that? Because they found that there are three types of cones. One type of cone is very sensitive to the red light, and the other type of cone is very sensitive to the green light. And the third type of cone is very sensitive to the blue light. So there are different kinds of light. So I just talk about because light has different frequencies. So red light is lower frequency and blue light is higher frequency. Green light is in the middle. So actually the nature is that there are different kinds of cones can detect different kinds of lights with different frequencies. One is for red, one type is for red, and one type is for green, and another type is for blue. So any color that we see is a combination, a certain combination of the three colors. We can see the picture on the right. You can see here is a red circle, here is a blue circle, here is a green circle, but you can still see other colors in this picture. We can see the red, yellow part, because yellow is a combination of red and green. If the red is mixed with green with a 1-to-1 ratio, you can see a real yellow color. That's how you see yellow color. Yellow is actually a combination of red and green. And here's purple. How do you see purple? Because it's a combination of red and blue with a 1-to-1 ratio. And this color you can see is I don't know what the name of color is. but it's anyway, you can see it, and it's a combination of blue and green. In the middle, you can see white. How do you see white color? Because it's a combination of the three colors. So we combine red, green, and blue together, you can see white. So white is, it seems like the white, there's no color in white, but white is color. White is a combination of all the colors, and you can see white. That's the trichromatic theory of color vision. And also there is another theory that has a different explanation of why we can see color. It's called the opponent process theory. It has a different explanation. It says that the color is coded in some kind of opponent pairs. So there is black-white pair. There's one pair of colors, and the yellow and blue is another pair. Green and red is a third pair. Some cones is sensitive. Some kind of cones are sensitive to the one of the opponent colors, but inhibited by the other color. For example, there's some kind of cones in the eyes that can be sensitive to the black color, but inhibited by the white color. And some kind of cones are sensitive to the yellow color, but inhibited by the blue color. So why you can see black color? Because in that part, the cones, some kind of cones are activated. But in that part, some other parts that there is white color, the cones that are sensitive to the black are inhibited. So that's how you can see different colors. That's called opponent process theory. So both theories have their own righteousness. Means like they can be both right, but it relies on the more discoveries of scientists, explorations of which one is right, which one is wrong. I think they can be both right. So these two theories are the theories that scientists acknowledge they are right. So we cannot really tell which theory is righter than the other, but they can be both right. And another thing that we didn't know about is how the visual system can see the depth, because the environment we are living is a 3D environment. We can see pictures, but very easily, but how we see depth? It's a 3D environment, right? So there's height, there's broadness, and there's depth. How we see the depth? It's not really, we do not really see the depth, but we perceive the depth. It means that the color is seen in the eyes. We can detect color in the sensory receptors, but we cannot see the depth. Our brain is actually working on that. The brain is working on the visual signals, visual information, and to perceive the depth. How our brain use some kind of information, organize this information to see the depth? How do we do that? So there are some kind of clues or evidence in the picture that we can think or we can perceive, oh, that's a picture with the depth. So one type of evidence or clue is called binocular cues. Binocular cues. So we need to use information from both of the two eyes to judge or to decide, to tell whether this picture is a picture with a depth or not. So one example is called binocular disparity. Because each of eyeballs sees a slightly different picture. Because the two eyeballs are located in a slightly different location, slightly different place, so that each of the eyes receives a different picture of what we are seeing at the same moment. So if you block your left eyes and then you block your right eye, you can find that each of the eyes sees a slightly different picture. Why is that? Because the eyeballs are located in different places, right? One is on the right, left, and one is on the right. So use that kind of binocular disparity to tell how deep the thing is or the object is in the 3D environment. You can put your fingers in the middle of your eyes. You move your fingers far away, or you move your fingers near your eyes. You can tell, your brain can tell how deep the finger is. You can see that the finger is far away and the finger is near. That's how you can see the depth, how deep the object is in the environment using the binocular cues. And another type of cues is called the monocular cues. It means that the brain uses the information from only one eye to tell the depth, how deep the thing is. So one example is called a linear perspective. It means that if the picture or the things that we see have some kind of depth, the two parallel lines must converge into the same point in an image. So for example, the picture on the right, you can see a road, right? So you can see the blue sky and the clouds, and you can see there is a road in the picture. You can see that the parallel lines coverages into one focus point in this image. Is here. The two parallel lines converges. They converges into a same point. Why is that? Because it has depth, right? So the things that are far away are smaller, and things are near are bigger. So that's why the two lines that should be parallel are not really parallel in the picture, but they converges into one point. So you can see that, oh, that's deep. So this part is really far away, right? So this part is really near to the perspective. So this part is also very near. So far, this part is near. So yeah, so you can tell it relies on the perception. So if you never see a road, for example, if you never see a road, you wouldn't know those are parallel lines, right? So it depends on the knowledge, existing knowledge that you have. You can see that here's a road because in your image, in your brain, has a concept of roads. You know what a road is like. If you see the picture, when you see the picture, oh no, you know that oh that's a road, and that's one side of the road. This is another side of the road. The two lines here should be parallel. That's the existing knowledge that you have. You need to rely on that to tell whether their two lines are parallel. And once you decide, you know that these lines are parallel, but they converge. They are not parallel in the image. And then you know, oh, that's because this picture has a depth. Some things are deeper than the other things. So that's why it looks like this. So it's called a linear perspective. It's a type of monocular cube. So now you know what are the binocular cubes and what is monocular cubes. So actually people tell or perceive how deep the thing is using these kinds of cues. So rely on the perception rather than sensation. So color, people see color rely on sensation, but people see depth, people see how deep the thing is, rely on perception. And then let's talk about audition or hearing. So let's look at the structure of the ear. The picture on the right, so you can see the sound waves here, and they go to the sound waves is from that direction, from left and to right. You can see the pinna that is outside of the ear, of the system, auditory system. And inside of the ear, here is a canal here. It's called an auditory canal. Yeah, I think you know it. There is a canal inside of a ear. So, but what's inside of the canal? There are some kind of other stuff. Let's look at the picture on the right. So here is a canal. Yeah, you can see that's a canal here. And when the sound wave goes to this direction, from the left to right, the sound waves is moving in the air, and finally they reach this part. This part is called the eardrum, or it's called the tympanic membrane, or eardrum, just eardrum. Eardrum is a membrane. It's a very tight, it's very thin surface of cells. It's not a bone. It's not flesh of human flesh, but it's very thin layer of cells. Eardrum. Eardrum connects to some kind of bones. There are three bones here. They are called ossicles. There are three kinds of ossicles: medius, incus, and stapes. So this is a medius, this is incus, and this is a stapes. Three kinds of bones. So eardrum, three kinds of ossicles, and three kinds of ossicles connect this part. So they are all interconnected. So when the sound goes to direction, it reaches the eardrum. And when the sound is vibrating in the air, in fact, it reaches the eardrum, so that the eardrum is vibrating as well, with the same pitch and the loudness of the sound in the air. And the eardrum is vibrating and connects to the three ossicles. The three ossicles are all vibrating as a result. And the three ossicles are connecting to this part, so that this part is also vibrating. So what is in this part? So you can see three ossicles. Let me see. eardrum, and three ossicles. Three ossicles are connecting to a structure called the oval window. So oval window is like eardrum, is a very thin layer of cells. It's a membrane. So oval window is a part of the cochlea. So cochlea is a structure here. So how does it work? So when the ossicles is vibrating, it also influences the oval window. So the oval window is also vibrating, right? So oval window start to vibrate. And inside of the cochlea, it's not solid. Cochlea is not a solid thing. It's not like bone. Inside the bone is solid. So, but inside the cochlea it's empty. But the fluid, some kind of fluid is filled with inside of the cochlea. So there is fluid inside of the cochlea, and the cochlea itself is like a snail. It's a snail-shaped structure. And so it's like a curved tube. Cochlea is like a curved tube in the air. Inside of the cochlea, there is fluid. When the oval window is vibrating, the fluid in the cochlea starts to vibrate. So you can see the connection here. It's very delicate, very detailed structure inside of ear of how the sound is working. So the sound in the air goes to the eardrum. Eardrum starts to vibrate. And then the ossicles, the small bones, tiny bones start to vibrate. And the oval window start to vibrate. And oval window is connected to the fluid inside of the cochlea, so that the fluid inside of the cochlea start to vibrate. And on the inner surface of the cochlea, so the surface inside of cochlea, inside of the tube, there are a type of receptor, sensory receptor, is called hair cell. So hair cell is inside of the cochlea. Hair cell is in the fluid, because fluid is filled with in the cochlea. Hair cells is inside on the inner surface of the cochlea. So hair cells is actually connects the cochlea connects the fluid in the cochlea. So when the fluid is vibrating, the hair cells are also vibrating. So hair cells are the sensory receptors of the auditory system. The hair cells can detect the vibrating, the movement of the fluid in the cochlea. And hair cells transfer the movement into the signal in the neural system. So the hair cells connects to the nervous system and neural system. So hair cells are like the cones and rods in the eyes. Those are sensory receptors, where it's a place where the sensation happens. So yeah, so inside of it's like a, for example, here is, okay, for example, this is the surface of the cochlea, for example. It's like a tube shape, right? So inside of, on the inner surface of the cochlea, there are hair cells, for example. You can see all this part is the fluid inside of, in the cochlea. When the fluid is shaking, is vibrating, is moving, the hair cells are also moving with the fluid in the cochlea. So that when the hair cell, each of the hair cells is moving, the hair cells are activated. They start to transfer this information into the signal in the neurons. So that's how we hear the sounds. So actually, the auditory system is a system that catches the movement of the air or the vibration of the air and transfer the vibration or movements of the air into the neural signals. The question, so how do our ears can know the sound with a certain pitch or certain frequency? So how do ears tell the difference among the sounds with different pitches, right? So how do we tell do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do? How we tell the difference between do and la, and mi and fa? There's a theory called the place theory that gives the explanation for why we can tell the different pitches. That theory tells us that there are different hair cells. Hair cells on the different places of the inner surface of the cochlea are sensitive to the sounds of different pitches. So the basilar membrane is the surface of the cochlea. So basilar membrane and hair cell. Basilar membrane is just the inner surface of the cochlea. So for example, if that is the basilar membrane, here are hair cells, right? So there are a lot of hair cells on different portions, on different parts of the basilar membrane. For example, these parts of the hair cells, they're sensitive to a certain pitch sound. But this part of the hair cells, they are sensitive to another pitch. So when the sound is coming in with a certain pitch, only a part of the hair cells are activated. And they send the signal to the nervous system. And next time there's a sound with another pitch comes into the ear, only another part of the hair cells are activated. They send the signal to the neural system. That's how we can tell different pitches. That happens when the sensation occurs, right? So that's not it's how we see different colors, right? So different cones, there are 3 kinds of cones are sensitive to different kinds of colors, different kinds of lights with different frequencies. And yeah, some kinds are only sensitive to the red color, and some cones are only sensitive to the yellow color. The pattern or the way is really like to how we hear different pitches of sounds. Only some portion of only some hair cells. Some hair cells are sensitive to certain pitch of sound, and only some hair cells are sensitive to another pitch of the sound, so that we can hear different pitches of sound. And another question, how do the ears can tell the location of the sound? Sometimes we can tell where the sound is coming from, which direction at least. And even we can tell the location of the sound. How do we tell that? That relies on the perception, not sensation. We use like the evidence from the 2 eyes, because our 2 eyes are located in different locations, different places, so that at the same time, the sounds that we hear from 2 ears are slightly different. We use those differences from 2 eyes. Our brain can use the information from the 2 ears to decide the location of the sound. So those evidence is called binaural cues. It's not binocular, it's called binaural cues. And for example, there is interaural level difference. For example, if the sound is from the left side, what happens? The sound on the left side is louder than the sound that we hear on the right side, because the sound is from the left side. Because if, for example, here is somebody, here are 2 ears, and one is left and one is right, left and right, right? So if the sound is coming from this place, from the left, for example, that's the origin of the sound. The sound goes to this direction, right? But here is a characteristic of the sound. When the sound is close to the origin of the sound, that sound is louder. When the sound passes in the air, the sound becomes weaker and weaker and weaker. It means that if more close to the origin of the sound, more louder the sound is. So can you get me? So I think you can get it. You have the experience. When you are really close to a car, and that car is making a noise, you can hear very, very loud noise. But when the car is driving away, far away from you, then that noise is weaker and weaker and weaker because that car is far away from you. So that's one characteristic of the sound movement. So when it reaches the left eye, left ear, it's louder, and it reaches the right ear, it's weaker. So the brain can tell the difference, the loudness difference between the 2 ears, and tell, oh, that sound is either on the left or on the right. Another kind of cue is called a interaural timing difference. So it's not the loudness difference, and that's the timing difference, because there is a small difference in the time at which a given sound wave arrives at each ear, because it needs a time for the sound wave to travel in the air, right? So, for example, if the origin of sound is from here, it needs time to travel. So 1 second it travels here, second 2 travels here, second 3 travels here, and the left ear hears it, get the sound, and needs another second to reach to the right ear. There's a timing difference. The brain can tell that very quickly. The example I gave is very extreme sound, a very extreme example. In reality, the sound is traveling very, very fast, very, very fast. So it's not the time difference is much less than 1 second. But the brains can still tell the difference. The same sound appears in a different time. So in a different time, so the brain can tell the difference. When the sound reaches to the left ear earlier than the right ear, it means that the sound is on the left, right? Because the sound is on the left, so the left ear hears the sounds first, and the right ear hears the sound later. So it's called an interaural timing difference. So with the binaural cues, we can easily tell whether the sound is on the left or on the right. But it's very different to tell the sound if it is on the front or on the back. Why is that? Think about it. Because you only have 2 ears, you can tell whether it's left or right. The sounds in the front is not left or right. It's in the front, right? But like in this occasion, in this situation, how do you tell the location of the sound? If the sound is right above you. So it actually is very simple. You can turn your head on the left or to the left or to the right. You can turn your head, right? So you can turn right. So the direction of your ears are different. So when the sound is occurring in your front, you can either turn your head to the left or turn your head to the right. So when you turn your head to the left, the sound in your front becomes the sounds on your right. You can try yourself. So actually, our physical body use all kinds of clues and evidence to tell the location of the sound. We cannot really directly sense the location of the sound, but we can use some kind of cues to determine the location of the sound with our perception, with our brain abilities to organize this information, to interpret this information. But overall, it's really difficult to decide the location of the sounds in general. So let's talk about other senses besides audition and vision. So next one is gustation. It's about tasting. So there are 5 kinds of tastes in total. So all the food we take, all the food we eat, have either one or a combination of these 5 tastes. So one is sweet. So something is sweet, that's easy to understand. Something is salty. So because we eat salt, so most of our food is salty and sour. We sometimes eat some kind of apple or oranges, so they are sour. Bitter, so that's also easy to tell. So something is bitter. The medicines, pills, some pills are very bitter. And another taste is called umami. So it's something that we do not usually know of. It's a taste of freshness, or it's like a taste of meat. So if we eat some kind of meat, we can know it. We can know that's a meat. So that's the meat freshness. So meat has a special taste that is called umami. Yeah, so how can you tell something you eat is meat or vegetable or grain, some like a rice or noodle? Because you can tell, because the existence of umami. So when you cannot see anything, when you cannot hear anything, and you eat a random thing in your mouth, how can you tell it's a meat or not? Actually, you can tell the difference, because meat has the taste of umami and the vegetables do not. Yeah, and the receptor cells or sensory receptors for the sense of gustation is called taste buds. So taste buds are located under the surface of the towns. So on the surface of towns, we have the sense of gustation because we have the taste buds on the surface, under the surface of the towns. You can see this is the taste buds, and this is the surface of the town, and this environment is a town, and it's like the taste buds are buried under the surface, right under the surface of the town. And these are the receptor cells for taste, and these are nerves. And olfaction is about smelling. We can smell different smells because there are sensory receptors inside our nose. The sensory receptors are olfactory bulbs. They're located inside of the nose. That's smelling, olfaction. And the next one is the vestibular sense. So vestibular sense is about the sense of balance that helps us to maintain the balance and the body posture. So where is the vestibular sense is located, or where are the receptor cells for the vestibular sense? Those cells are also located in the ears, the same with the audition sense. So you can see the picture on the right. Just now, when we talk about audition, we talk about the cochlea, we talk about the oval window here, this part. So this part is for hearing, but there is another part in this structure, this part. This part is for vestibular sense. This part is only for hearing. So they are located in the same structure. So in this structure, it's really like cochlea. Inside of these structures is empty. There is fluid inside of this structure. These are also like curved tubes. Those are like curved tubes. Inside the tube, there is fluid. Also, there are hair cells on the inner surface of these curved tubes. So there are three tubes here. You can see superior canal, posterior canal, and horizontal canal. So that is very important. So with the hair cells in these three canals, we can have a sense of balance. So how does it happen? When our body is moving, right? So when our body is moving, the hair cells, the fluid inside of these three canals is also moving, right? So when our head is moving, the fluid inside of the canal is moving, so that hair cells are activated, because hair cells can detect the movement of the fluid inside of these canals. So when we are moving, we can know it. That's the vestibular sense. Why we can maintain the balance? Because we know where, what direction, what speed our body is moving. So when we are about to fall down, we can know it directly, very quickly, because we are about to fall down. The body is moving really fast and moving forward, for example. The hair cells in these three canals know it and send signals to the brain. The brain knows it. The brain is get the signal is activated. Of course, it's also important for the proprioception, the perception of the body position, and also for the perception of the body's movement. Because vestibular sense, proprioception, and kinesthesia, the three senses rely on the movement of the body, right? So that's why we have the senses for the body movement. So that is vestibular sense. Actually, vestibular sense, the information goes to the cerebellum. So cerebellum is under the occipital lobe. It's under the forebrain. Cerebellum is the part that processes the information about the vestibular sense. And these are the stuff about different senses. We haven't talked about in detail about gustation, olfaction, vestibular sense, because the time is limited in this video. And if you want to know more about it, you can read a textbook and know other stuff, read other materials to know about this. And also, we haven't talked about nociception and the thermoception. Nociception is about the feeling of pain, and the thermoception is about the feeling of temperature. So those, and also the somatosensation. Somatosensation is about touching. So we haven't talked about those. For those, we'll not cover in this course, but you can know more about by reading the textbook or read other materials. Actually, the sensory receptors for those three senses are located under the surface of the skin. There are different kinds of there are a lot of different kinds of receptor cells under the skin. Our skin can have a sense of touching and temperature and pain. And next, I want to talk about perception, talk more about perception. So how do we exactly form the perception? So one specific example is a Gestalt principles of perception. So there is a movement in the history of psychology at the earlier stage of psychology, like before 20th century. It's called a Gestalt psychology movement. So Gestalt is not an English word, it's a German word. So this word is a German word, is Gestalt. So Gestalt in German basically means form or pattern. So the psychology or scientists from Germany in the 19th century, they found that people have some kind of principles to form some kind of patterns inside the brain to have the perception. So that's why they call it Gestalt. This kind of branch of the psychology is called Gestalt psychology. So let's see something, like see some pictures to have a direct experience of Gestalt psychology. So in this picture, what can you see in this picture? What can you see? From my own perspective, I see it seems like there is a triangle, the white color triangle that covers three circles. Those three circles are black. What can you see? It's like a white triangle that is above the three black color circles. So the three circles are not complete, right? So it's like a part of it is like covered by, is blocked by a white triangle. It seems like that. So the triangle is like here. So this is like a white triangle that covers the three circles with black color. And next one. What can you see in this picture? I think it's very easy to tell. It's an animal. It's a panda, right? So can you see a panda? I can see a panda, right? So the eyes here, because the panda's two eyes are surrounded by the black hair, so it's usually like that. The face is white, but the two eyes, the parts that surrounds the two eyes are black. The ears are also black. There are four legs, three legs, and that's the body of the panda, and that's the head of the panda right here. So that's where we can what we can see. This picture, 5 circles. That's 5 circles. They are together, right? So that's what we can see. So Gestalt is a form or pattern, the German word for form or pattern. So what's a philosophy under the Gestalt psychology? Why they call it Gestalt? So because they found that when we have perceptions, when we can tell something from the visual information, it's like we form a perception not only relying on the sensory information. We can tell that is that and this is this. We can tell the objects in the visual information, not only because it is a sum of the visual information. There is something else. The whole is much more than the sum of the different parts. So the whole is different from the sum of the sensory information. For example, here, what we see, a panda. How we tell it's a panda? It's not really a panda. It's not a real panda, right? So it's not a real panda that we see usually. If you look at the details of this picture, this part is totally black. This part is black, right? We do not really see the feet of a panda. We do not really see the eyes, but we can perceive, we can think that's a panda. We can think, oh, here are 2 eyes, here's a mouth, here's 2 feet, 4 feet. Actually, there are only 3 feet in the picture, but we know that there's another feet under it, like behind it. We can tell, oh, here's a head. How do we tell? It's not a real panda. Because the sum is the whole is much more than just the summary of the different parts that we see. So that is called form or pattern or gestalt. In our brain, there are different forms or patterns or gestalts inside our brain already. When we see something, we use those patterns or forms or gestalts to understand the content in the sensory information. So why these are 5 circles? How do you tell? Because there are forms and patterns of circles inside of your brain, so that you can perceive, oh, these are 5 circles. How to tell there is a triangle? Because you have a form of triangle inside the brain. It seems like, oh, here's a triangle here. But in fact, there may not be a triangle. It's just some kind of a shapes. So there are some ways for our brains to form the perceptions. And those ways are predictable. We can summarize some kind of principles to know about how brains form those perceptions. So let's know about these principles. The first one is called the figure-ground relationship. Our brain tends to segment the vision into the figure and the ground. So the ground is the background. The figure is the object. When we see something, when we see a picture or when we see something, we tend to like segment the vision into two parts. One part is the thing, the object. The other part is the background. The background is the rest of besides the object. So this figure on the right help us to understand the figure-ground relationship. So what can you see? The same question. What can you see in this picture on the right? Somebody may say, oh, it's a vase. Somebody may say there are two human faces that are facing each other. They're both right. So because when you think there is a vase, you segment the white part as the object, the black part as the background. So the white part is like a vase here, right? So this part is like a vase. If the white part is the object, the black part is background. That is a vase. But if you perceive it as another way, these are two human faces. The black parts are two human faces. Right? So the white part is the background. So either way is okay. It depends on like how do you decide which part is object, which part is background. But people tend to have that perception, like they tend to find the object out of the background. That process is totally automatic. We do not have to intentionally have that process. Our brain is working on that automatically. So that's called figure-ground relationship. We tend to divide the vision into two parts, the object and the background. Another principle is called proximity. It says that the things that are close together tend to be grouped together. So the picture on the left, here, this part, there are a lot of blue dots. So it seems like these dots are in the same group of dots. But the picture on the left, right here, how many groups of dots are here? It seems like there are three groups of dots. Why is that? Because these dots are together. They're close together. These dots are close together. These dots are close together. You can see the dots that are close to each other are grouped into one group. So it seems like there are three groups of dots, right? So that's the principle of proximity. So the things that are physically close together tend to be perceived as one group. But if something are really far away from another thing, they are not tend to be perceived as one group. They tend to be grouped as different groups. Another principle is similarity. So the things that are alike tend to be grouped together. It means that if there are things that they look alike, they tend to be grouped together. For example, in this picture, there are yellow dots and there are blue dots. How many groups of dots are here? For me, it seems like these are together, these are together, and these are together. One row of dots are together. Why is that? Because the first row of dots are yellow. They are different from the dots on the second row, because on the second row these are blue dots. On the third row, they tend to be they're yellow again. It seems like this one each row of the dots is one group. So that shows how similarity works. So things are alike. These things that look alike tend to be perceived as one group. Another example is the sports game, in basketball game, or in the football game. When the game is going on, how do you tell which player belongs to which team? Think about it. They're the players in both teams. They are playing in the same ground. How do you tell which player belongs to which team? Not from the faces. If you know somebody's face, that does not count. For example, if you do not know anybody in any of the teams, how do you tell which player belongs to which team? Usually, you tell which player belongs to which team based on the color of their clothes. That's why all the players in one team, they wear the same shirts, they wear the same clothes, the same color, same design. It's true for every sports game, right? And for example, in the basketball game, the Rockets, they wear the red shirts. The Lakers, they wear either the yellow shirts or blue shirts, depends on home. It's the home or it's away, right? So when the Rockets play with the Lakers, you can very fast tell whether which player is in the Lakers, which player is in the Rockets. How do you tell? Because all the Rockets players wear the red shirts, and all the Lakers players wear the yellow shirts normally. So that design is intentional. They use the principle of similarity of human perception to let you can tell the difference between the two teams. So you are not confused at all when you are watching the game, because the things that look together tend to be grouped, tend to be perceived as one group. So one team has one color only, or one team has the same colors, same design, same patterns only. And another example is about the shape of the objects or the things. Continuity. So in this picture, how many lines are here? In this picture, how many lines? And most likely, people think these are 2 lines. Even though these are just a group of dots, but people perceive them as 2 lines. If you connect these dots together, you can see 2 lines, right? So these are 2 lines. However, these are not 4 lines. They tend to, people tend to see 2 lines rather than 4 lines. If you ask like why there are 4 lines, this part can be 1 line, and this part can be 1 line, and this part can be 1 line, and this part can be 1 line. But people tend not to perceive like that. People tend to perceive this as 1 line and this as another line. So why is that? Because people tend to see the continuous, smooth flowing lines rather than jagged, broken lines. It means that this is 1 line. People tend to perceive this is 1 line, and this is another line. People will tend not to perceive this as 1 line or this as 1 line because this is broken. This is jagged. This is not continuous. This kind of lines are like more, it flows smoothly and it's more continuous. So they tend to perceive this as 1 line. If you look at this, like this, it's not look like 1 line. It's like a lot of lines just together because it's broken. It's not flow smoothly. That's the principle of continuity. That's the number 4 principle, continuity. Next one, the last example that we talk about is called closure. So people tend to see complete objects. They tend to see complete objects. So look at the picture on the bottom. So what can you see? What can you see? It's really clear. You can see a circle here and a rectangle on the right here. How can you see it? Actually, these are just incomplete lines here. But people tend to see complete objects. People tend to see a circle here. People tend to see a rectangle here. Right? So it's very magical. So people tend to see some complete objects, even though in reality, those are just parts, some lines, some incomplete lines. So that principle is called closure. Even though those lines are not connected, but people tend to connect those lines in their mind because they tend to see complete objects. So the example that I gave just now, here, you can see a panda because of the principle closure. You tend to see a complete object. You tend to see here's a line here, see a line here, line here, right? And why you see 5 circles here? That's is about the principle of continuity, right? You tend to see there, here's a circle here, here's a circle here. So why don't you see a like shape like this? Why don't you see a shape like this? Why don't you see a shape like this? Because it's broken. The lines are broken. You tend to see some continuous lines. So that it involves the principles of the continuity. Okay, so the first one is the figure ground relationship tends to divide the picture into two parts, the figure, the object, and the background. The second one is proximity, things that are close together, they tend to be grouped together. The third principle is similarity. The things they look like, they tend to be grouped together. Next one, continuity, tend to see continuous, smoothly flowing lines. The next principle, closure, they tend to organize perceptions into complete objects. So these are the 5 Gestalt's principles of how people perceive objects. So all the examples are about vision, but I want to mention that these principles do not only exist in vision; they also exist in other senses, in other kinds of perceptions, such as hearing. They also the hearing of the sounds also involve these principles. So I think that's it for today's lecture. And another video in this week you can see, you can watch on Canvas is about the review for the first midterm. But this video is only about the content in week 5, in chapter 5. And here are the things that you need to know for this week. First, you need to know the concepts, these following concepts. Sensation, you need to know. Perception, you need to know. And also you need to know what is absolute threshold. And these are the parts in the visual system. So what is pupil, what is lens, what is retina, what is cones, what is rods. So these are all inside of eyeballs. And also you need to know about the trichromatic theory of color vision. So you do not have to know about the another theory of color vision, but you need to know about trichromatic theory of color vision. And these two are about the ears, the auditory system, audition system, the cochlea and hair cells. And also you need to know what is vestibular sense. And last, you need to know the 5 principles of Gestalt psychology. You can give some examples. And that's it for this week. And thank you for watching this video.